It was a packed first day back in the House yesterday with James Shaw's resignation and the Prime Minister questioned on repealing smoke-free legislation. Joining us for the first time again this year is Prime Minister Christopher Luxon. Welcome back.
Well, good morning, Mel. Happy New Year to you, and hope you've had a good break as well.
I very much did. And yourself, did you have a break?
I got a good break between Christmas and New Year, and then I've been back at work for the last 2 to 3 weeks, which has been really great to get back into the swing of things again. So, I hope that new employee of yours is working out all right, Lloyd. I hope he's going okay. And of course, under a national government, if it doesn't work out, you can move him on after 90 days. But at least you've taken a chance on him, which is the main thing.
Exactly, yeah. It does give us the power to be a little bit more flexible, doesn't it? And he'll have that hanging over him for the next 88 days or so. Thank you. I want to ask you about the first day in the House yesterday. Chris Hipkins asked you whether any ministers or any minister had received any donation from anyone associated with a tobacco lobby group. Now, you said you weren't aware at the time yesterday. Have you subsequently looked into that?
No, I haven't. I'm not aware of any of that. Parties have, we've got a very good declaration regime here in New Zealand about declaring donations, and parties, should be following those rules, which I expect them to do. Was
the question not enough to concern you to look into something like that?
Well, look, on smoke-free, the position is really clear as to what's happening here. What we've said is, look, we don't support the changes that the government made just before the election. That legislation hasn't really bitten in, or the changes that they proposed haven't taken effect. We want to stick with the current legislation that has driven smoking rates down tremendously over the last decade, and that's what we're focused on doing. And we're now in a great place. We've had another 2 points come down. I think only 6.5% of Kiwis now smoke daily on a regular basis, and we've got to work now really hard on that group to get them off smokes as well.
But Prime Minister, what I'm asking about is donations from tobacco lobbyists, and there was a question put to you in the House yesterday, and I'm wondering whether that is something that you would ask your ministers, just to be clear, whether there is any potential conflict, or just so you are aware of the landscape.
Yeah, well, look, as I said, there's a couple of things at play. One is we have a really good declaration, a high-quality declaration regime here in New Zealand for party political donations, and that's a good chance for donations to be declared. Secondly, all Cabinet ministers have to comply with the Cabinet manual, and frankly, at every Cabinet meeting, we also ask every Cabinet minister to declare up front if there's any conflicts. That's a process that I've put in place since running Cabinet meetings. So there's a number of avenues if there are real or perceived conflicts of interest for ministers to be able to declare as such. And for those to be managed. And so we expect all ministers to comply with those processes.
Judith Collins and Winston Peters off to Australia today as Foreign and Defence Minister. There are increasing demands and requests of our New Zealand Defence Force at the moment, both in the Middle East, in the Pacific, our commitments with training Ukrainian troops amongst others. Does the Defence Force still have a 7.5% savings target?
Yeah, well, let's just back up a little bit. Every government agency has been asked to deliver savings, ideally in their back rooms where there's inefficiencies. They might be using a whole bunch of consultants or contractors or working on programs, frankly, that aren't part of our agenda as we go forward. And that's what you'd reasonably expect, because the problem that we've got is that under the previous government, there was an 84% increase in government spending. And the problem with that is that's what's led into domestic inflation, that's what's lifted interest rates, that's what's starting to slow the economy down. So one of the things we do to get on top of inflation and the cost of living is to get the government agencies to generate savings. Now, in the cases of defence and health and education and some other portfolios, what we acknowledge is that they've got significant cost pressures coming at them. But we still want them to have that culture and that mindset to say, let's make things as efficient as possible. Any money that they save will be recycled into those frontline services, and also those portfolios have been invited to make some budget bids, and as we go into the budget process in May, we would expect that some of those portfolios will have obviously increases in their total budgets as well. But we want to get into this culture, as the taxpayer would expect us to do, to make sure that government departments are not wasting money, that every dollar is actually deployed going to where it needs to go to. So, in Defence's case, we're asking them to generate savings. In their case, the savings will actually be kept within the Defence budget and deployed into and recycled into the frontline services. And yes, they may well make a budget bid, have been invited to make a budget bid actually, which will be considered as part of our total budget in May.
Okay, so overall funding for defence is only going to increase potentially. There will be no decrease
certainly
in
on those portfolios like defence and health and education, we expect that they'll have more money post the budget. But equally, it's an and, not an or. We also expect them to be efficient and to generate savings. But in their case, rather than the savings coming through to central government, what we're going to do is make sure those savings are recycled within their existing budgets as well to support those improved frontline services that we need to see.
Does that mean they are exempt from that target? Do they just have to make some kind of savings in the back room? Or is that 7.5 still a target in defence?
We expect them. Yeah, well, what we're looking at is a target overall across the whole of government. There will be some government agencies that will generate a lot more than 7.5%. There will be some that may struggle to get there. But what we're asking all those CEs is to go through all of their individual budgets, line item by line item, stop the dumb stuff, stop the stuff that's not working, make sure that everything's as efficient as it possibly can be, that we get rid of the inefficiencies and the contractors and the consultants and all of that. And in the case of defence, that savings will be regenerated and recycled back into the frontline services, and also that portfolio will have a budget bid and will most likely come out of the budget process with more cash as well.
Most likely. Is that because of the attrition rate? I mean, one in 10 defence personnel have left. There is reports that there's going to be a payment to our SAS troopers to try and keep them in the job until June next year. Is that why there is going to be a budget increase for defence?
Well, I mean, again, under the previous government, defence has been run down, very badly over that last 6-year period. And what we really want to make sure is that, ultimately we can, as we improve the financial position of the economy, that's our job number one. Is we've inherited a terrible set of books. We've got a lot of fiscal clean-up to do in terms of making sure that we've actually got the economy working in the right way. And as the economy gets stronger, we obviously want to be able to put more of that money into those improving public services and also portfolios like defence. But yes, I agree with you. I think it's been an incredibly challenging time for defence, particularly in the last 3 years. We've got a very good minister there that's going to be very focused on advocating strongly for defence, and Judith Collins. And you're also seeing us get more engaged with the world, as evidenced by us sending some New Zealand Defence Force, for example, into the Red Sea area as well. And part of that is all part of, a byproduct of that is that defence forces actually want to be on missions and actually doing things, and they actually want to be supporting New Zealand's interests. And that's exactly what we're asking them to do in that case. So I think, there's a lot of work on defence to make sure that we improve morale and make sure that we have a defence force that is interoperable with Australia in particular and is capable of protecting New Zealand's interests going forward.
There's also huge demands, obviously, in terms of capital investment in defence, but not just defence. And you mentioned yourself as well, education and health. In terms of the priority for the government, because the reason these cuts are being made or they're being requested of government departments is to fund tax cuts, right? Which is, I guess, a short-term benefit for people in terms of cost of living. But it comes at the expense of a long-term investment in infrastructure. So I
disagree, Mel. Yeah, I really disagree, because what I want New Zealanders to understand is, we had a previous government that increased government spending by 84%. It also increased debt from $5 to $100 billion, loading that on future generations of Kiwis. Those two things in themselves, the increase in spending, the increase in debt, have put New Zealand under huge, huge pressure. And so we need a cultural change here in Wellington with the public servants. It's the taxpayers' money, and we've all seen dumb, stupid, inefficient activity happening, and we want that to stop. We're also being very clear as a government. We have a 100-day plan.
Do you think that cleaning up that inefficient spending is going to be enough to fund both tax cuts and the infrastructure spend in those departments that we've spoken about?
Well, what we want to do is get rid of the waste, the inefficiency and the bad spending. We want to make sure that things are ruthlessly focused on the critical priorities that actually improve outcomes for New Zealanders, and that's what we're focused on. Yes, we're going to deliver tax relief, as we talked about. We'll talk more about that later on in the year. But exactly, what we're focused on here is making sure that our public services are delivering for New Zealanders. And I think we have to be really honest about that. And I'm trying to be really straight up with the New Zealand people. You cannot increase government spending by 84% and not improved housing, health, education by 84%, for example, and at the same time load up New Zealanders with a huge interest bill associated with a massive increase in debt, and actually think that everything's great. Everything's not great. We have a major set of financial challenges to deal with going forward, and that's what we're facing up to. And a part of it is getting the government and the government spending right, getting it right size, getting it linked to actually achievement and results for New Zealanders. If we can do that job, we also have a benefit which we start to lower domestic inflation. When we start to lower inflation, we can start to bring interest rates down. When interest rates come down, the economy grows and people maintain employment. So there's a real focus here. One of the first jobs we have to do is get efficiency in the public service and make sure it's actually delivering for New Zealanders, because that's been the frustration of Kiwis over the last 3 years. That's what they've been incredibly frustrated about. They haven't seen outcomes or improved results. Mel, here's a good example. This week for me is a critical week for New Zealand because it's the week that kids go back to school. Well, we have 55% of our kids, as at the end of last year, not in school regularly. So I'm asking all parents to get your kids to school. That's your job. Make sure that happens. But then we have a major challenge around education. Now, that's despite the previous government having spent a lot of money, added a lot of extra public servants. We actually got worse results. So I'm being really serious about it. I want that public service ruthlessly focused. My message to the CEs and the chief executives has been, you are going to deliver the priorities that we're asking you to deliver. Get kids to school, attendance, make sure that we get better academic outcomes in the case of education, and every portfolio has got those goals and those deliverables that they have to deliver on.
It's a big week coming to Prime Minister with Waitangi Day. Are you going to be in Waitangi on Waitangi Day?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, looking forward to it, actually. Waitangi is always an intense time. If you go back through Waitangi days across New Zealand over many decades, there'll be a lot of conversation, good conversation. There'll be also some challenge and some provocation as expected, and looking forward to it.
Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, thanks so much for your time this morning.